The laughter hit me like a slap across the face. My brother Marcus stood in the middle of my cousin's living room, pointing at my car through the window, his voice carrying over the family reunion chatter. "It's a miracle that Heap even made it here," he announced, grinning wide. I was betting it would break down in the driveway. The room erupted. Aunt Patricia nearly spilled her wine laughing. Uncle Tony shook his head, chuckling. Even my teenage nephew smirked from the corner. I forced my lips into what I hoped looked like a smile, but my cheeks burned hot. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my coffee cup. 23 years I'd been driving that car. 23 years of reliable service, and this was how they saw it. Marcus wasn't done. "Maybe we should start a collection," he continued. "Get Rebecca something from this century." More laughter. I nodded along, pretending it was funny, but inside something cracked. I'd raised 2 kids mostly alone while he played around in college for 6 years. I'd worked double shifts to keep food on the table while he found himself in Europe. But somehow I was the family joke. The drive home was quiet except for the familiar creaks and rattles that had become my car's voice over the years. I ran my hand over the steering wheel, feeling every worn spot where my fingers had gripped through countless trips. This car had carried me through everything. Late-night drives to the hospital when my daughter had pneumonia. Early morning commutes when I was working 2 jobs to pay for my son's baseball uniforms. Road trips to visit my mom before she passed. Windows down, music playing, kids in the back seat arguing over snacks. It had been there when my husband left, when the mortgage was due, when life felt impossible. The engine hummed steadily, just like it always had. No fancy leather seats or shiny paint job, but it had never let me down. Not once. Other people saw rust and dents. I saw resilience. I saw loyalty. I saw a partner that had helped me survive the hardest years of my life. As I pulled into my driveway, I whispered, "Don't listen to them, old girl. We know what we've been through together." The headlights dimmed as I turned off the engine, and for a moment, we just sat in comfortable silence. Marcus called the next morning, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Rebecca, you'll never guess what happened," he said, not waiting for me to respond. "The city council chose my proposal for the annual fundraising gala. We're expecting the governor, maybe even some federal representatives. This is huge for my business." I held the phone away from my ear as he rattled on about catering and decorations and networking opportunities. This was typical Marcus. Everything was about image, about connections, about climbing higher. "It's going to be the social event of the year," he continued. "Black tie, luxury cars, the works. Speaking of which," his tone shifted, becoming pointed. "You should probably think twice about coming if you can't arrive in style. I mean, can you imagine pulling up in that thing while everyone else has proper transportation?" My stomach tightened. There it was again. The casual cruelty disguised as brotherly advice. "I understand," I said quietly. "Of course you do," he replied, missing my sarcasm entirely. "Family supports family, right?" This could really put me on the map. After he hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time, his words echoing in my head. That afternoon, I sat in my garage, looking at my car with new eyes. I remembered the day I bought it, 23 years ago. I was 25, newly married, full of hope. The salesman had shown me the features, the reliability ratings, the safety scores. It wasn't the fanciest model on the lot, but it was solid, dependable, perfect for starting a family. Over the years, it had been my constant companion. When my husband walked out, this car drove me to job interviews. When money was tight, I learned to change its oil myself, watching YouTube videos late at night. When my son broke his arm, this car got us to the emergency room in record time. When my daughter graduated valedictorian, this car proudly displayed her honor student bumper sticker. It had carried groceries when we could barely afford them, transported furniture from garage sales, hauled Christmas trees that were too big for the trunk. During my brother's wild college years, this same car had picked him up from parties when he was too drunk to drive. It had taken him to job interviews when he couldn't afford his own transportation. But apparently, he'd forgotten all that. All he saw now was something to be ashamed of. At the next family dinner, the mockery continued. "Rebecca's car is practically vintage now," my sister-in-law Amanda said with a laugh. "You could probably donate it to a museum." My niece giggled from across the table. Maybe it belongs in one of those old-timey car shows, Aunt Rebecca. You know, for history. Even my own children seemed uncomfortable. My daughter Katie shifted in her seat, and my son Alex studied his plate intently. I felt like I was shrinking, becoming smaller with each comment. There are some great deals on newer cars right now, my cousin suggested helpfully. I could connect you with my dealer. Or leasing, Amanda added. Much more affordable. They talked about me like I wasn't there, discussing my financial situation, my choices, my life. All because of a car that had served me faithfully for over 2 decades. I wanted to defend it, to explain what it meant to me, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I make them understand that this wasn't about having enough money for something newer? This was about loyalty, about appreciation, about recognizing value that couldn't be measured in showroom shine. But looking around the table at their faces, I realized they would never understand. To them, worth was measured in dollars and status symbols. That night, I sat in my garage with the door closed, my hand resting on the car's hood. The metal was cool under my palm, and I could hear the engine ticking as it cooled down from our drive home. Suddenly, all the hurt and frustration crashed over me like a wave. Tears spilled down my cheeks, and I didn't try to stop them. I'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and this was how my own family saw me. As someone to be pitied, someone whose choices were embarrassing. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let myself cry, but after a few minutes, something shifted inside me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and looked at my reflection in the side mirror. My eyes were red, but there was something else there now. Determination. I straightened up and patted the dashboard gently. They think they know us, I whispered to my car. They think they can judge us based on how we look. But they have no idea what we're capable of, do they? The garage was silent, except for the settling sounds of the house around us. They'll see, I said quietly, my voice growing stronger. Oh, they'll definitely see. The call came 3 days later, just as I was finishing my morning coffee. Is this Rebecca Thompson? The voice asked. It was professional, confident. Yes, this is Rebecca. My name is Michael Rodriguez. I'm a producer with Heritage Documentary Films. We're working with the National History Channel on a documentary called America's Most Faithful Cars, and your vehicle came highly recommended by your local auto parts store. My heart started beating faster. I'm sorry, recommended for what? We're featuring cars that represent American endurance, loyalty, and values. Cars that have been with families through thick and thin. Your 2001 sedan has an incredible story, according to our research. I almost dropped the phone. A national documentary? About my car? We'd like to feature your car and your story in our documentary. The premiere screening happens to be next Saturday evening at the Downtown Convention Center. My mind raced. But I don't understand. How did you even find out about my car? Mr. Jenkins at the auto parts store has been documenting faithful cars in the community for years. He submitted your story, and frankly, it's exactly what we're looking for. I looked out at my car sitting in the driveway. The same car my family mocked. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I'd be honored. When Marcus called that afternoon to complain about catering costs, I mentioned casually that I might be busy Saturday night. Busy? He laughed. Doing what? Polishing that relic? His tone was so dismissive, so casually cruel, that I felt my jaw clench. But instead of getting angry, I felt something else. A quiet satisfaction that he had no idea what was coming. Something like that, I replied calmly. Well, don't let me keep you from your very important car maintenance, he said with obvious sarcasm. I've got real work to do. This gala is going to be featured in 3 different magazines. The photographer alone cost more than most people's monthly salary. After he hung up, I realized I was smiling. Marcus thought he knew everything, thought he had all the answers. He measured success in dollar signs and magazine features. But he was about to learn that real respect couldn't be bought or staged. It had to be earned. And unlike him, I hadn't spent my life chasing status symbols. I'd spent it being dependable, being trustworthy, being the kind of person whose story was worth telling on national television. Marcus had no idea what was coming, and that made everything so much sweeter. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparing my car like never before. The production crew would be filming the following week, and they wanted the car to look its absolute best while still maintaining its authentic character. I cleaned every surface, polished every piece of chrome, and carefully conditioned the leather seats. I changed the oil, checked the tire pressure, and made sure every light worked perfectly. The local auto parts store owner, Mr. Jenkins, stopped by with a huge grin. "Rebecca, I can't believe they chose your car for the documentary. When they called asking about local cars with stories, yours was the first one I thought of." "You really recommended me?" I asked, touched by his kindness. "Of course. That car represents everything good about this community. Reliability, dedication, making things last." The car was responding to the attention. The paint gleamed, the chrome sparkled, and the interior looked rich and dignified. This wasn't about making it look expensive or flashy. This was about revealing the quality and character that had always been there, hidden under years of everyday use. By Thursday evening, the transformation was complete. It looked exactly like what it was, a well-loved, impeccably maintained classic that had been cared for by someone who understood real value. My daughter Katie found me in the garage Friday night, putting the finishing touches on the interior. "Mom," she said, her voice worried, "are you sure about this? What if people make fun of you on national TV? Uncle Marcus's friends." She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. Those people cared about brands and price tags, not substance. "Let them judge," I said, buffing a spot on the dashboard. "Baby, I've spent 23 years worrying about what other people think. I'm done with that." Katie sat on an old stool, watching me work. "But what if they edit it to make you look bad? What if Uncle Marcus says something mean after he sees it?" I stopped polishing and looked at my daughter. At 22, she was beautiful and smart, but she was also cautious in ways that broke my heart. Too many years of watching her mother shrink under criticism had taught her to avoid standing out. "Katie," I said gently, "sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. Sometimes you have to be willing to be vulnerable to find out who you really are." She nodded slowly, though I could see she was still worried. "Besides," I added with a smile I couldn't quite suppress, "I have a feeling this is going to turn out better than anyone expects. The next 24 hours were going to change everything." By Friday, rumors were swirling around town. The documentary crew had been spotted at various locations, and word was spreading about a major television production happening Saturday night. Marcus called me, practically vibrating with excitement. "Rebecca, you're not going to believe this," he said. "I just heard from someone at City Hall that there's some kind of big TV event happening downtown tomorrow night. Same time as my gala." I could hear him pacing, which he always did when he was worked up. This could actually work in my favor. If there's media attention downtown, some of it might spill over to my event. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. "That sounds wonderful, Marcus," I said and meant it. My brother deserved success. He'd worked hard building his consulting firm. It was the way he treated other people that bothered me, not his ambition. "The whole town's talking about it," he continued. "Everyone wants to know what show is filming, but it's all very hush-hush. Professional stuff." He paused. "This is going to be the night that establishes me as a real player in this city. After tomorrow, people will take me seriously." I almost felt sorry for him. Marcus had spent so much time chasing recognition that he'd forgotten the difference between respect and attention. But maybe that was about to change. Maybe we were both about to learn some important lessons about what really mattered. The pre-event dinner was held at Marcus's house Friday night, with his key supporters and major donors. I hadn't planned to go, but Katie convinced me it would look strange if I didn't show up. So there I was, sitting at the far end of the table while Marcus and Amanda entertained their guests with stories of their latest vacation to Napa Valley. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. They discussed wine collections and country club memberships, charity boards, and social connections. When someone mentioned their new Tesla, the whole table erupted in a discussion about electric vehicles and luxury features. I kept my mouth shut and picked at my salmon. "Rebecca," Amanda finally acknowledged me. "You're awfully quiet tonight. Everything okay?" All eyes turned to me, and I felt that familiar heat in my cheeks. "Just tired," I said with a smile. "Long week." Well, don't tire yourself out too much tomorrow, Marcus said with a laugh. Though I suppose you won't exactly be part of the main festivities anyway. His guests chuckled politely, not understanding the context but recognizing the dismissive tone. I nodded and went back to my dinner, but inside I was counting down the hours. Less than 24 hours until Marcus learned what real recognition looked like. Saturday morning brought another call from Michael Rodriguez. Rebecca, I wanted to confirm everything for tonight. The screening starts at 8, and we'd like you to arrive around 7:30 for some pre-event interviews. The film crew will be there to capture the audience reactions when they see your segment. I'll be there, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Excellent. I should mention, we've had an overwhelming response to the promotional materials. Local media wants interviews, and the National History Channel is sending their own crew to cover the premiere. My heart skipped. National coverage? Rebecca, your story really resonated with our test audiences. The segment about your car helping you through single motherhood, the loyalty, the character, it's exactly what America needs to see right now. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my coffee cup. In a few hours, my story would be broadcast to potentially millions of people. The same car my family mocked would be celebrated on national television. I thought about calling Marcus, about giving him a heads up, but decided against it. He'd spent enough time telling me what I wasn't good enough for. It was time for him to see what I was truly worth. Besides, the surprise would be so much sweeter this way. That afternoon, Marcus stopped by to check on me before his big event. He was dressed in an expensive tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, radiating confidence. Just wanted to make sure you're okay, he said, though his tone suggested he was really there to show off. I know tonight might be difficult for you, watching from the sidelines while I mingle with the city's elite. I was loading supplies into my car, making sure everything was perfect for the evening ahead. Marcus noticed and shook his head. Rebecca, you're not seriously going to drive that thing tonight, are you? With all the media downtown, the whole region will be watching. He gestured at my car like it was personally offensive to him. Imagine my embarrassment if my sister rolls up in that bucket of bolts. Lord, I'd die of shame. He laughed at his own joke, but there was real cruelty in it. Amanda emerged from their house, stunning in her designer gown. Oh my goodness, Rebecca, you're not planning to attend whatever little community event you're going to looking like that, are you? She gestured at my simple black dress. This is a very important evening for our family's reputation. Image matters. I closed my car door and turned to face them both. Don't worry about me, I said calmly. I think everything will work out just fine. Neither of them caught the confidence in my voice. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their superiority. That evening, I stood in my garage one final time before the most important night of my life. My hands moved over the car's surface, checking every detail. The chrome gleamed under the overhead light. The paint reflected my face clearly. The interior was immaculate. Everything was perfect. But more than that, everything felt right. This car had carried me through my hardest days, and now it would carry me to what might be my greatest moment of recognition. I thought about my children, who had learned to be proud of substance over style. I thought about all the years of quiet service, of being reliable when others were flashy, of choosing character over appearances. My phone buzzed with a text from Katie. Whatever happens tonight, Mom, I'm proud of you. I smiled and tucked the phone into my purse. Outside, I could hear the distant sounds of the gala beginning. Cars were arriving at the hotel, guests were gathering, and Marcus was probably basking in the attention. He had no idea that 6 blocks away, his entire worldview was about to shift. I took one last look around the garage, at this space where I'd maintained my faithful companion for over 2 decades. Ready, old girl? I whispered, patting the hood. Let's go show them what real value looks like. The convention center glowed with professional lighting and media trucks lined the street. I drove slowly past the entrance, watching the scene unfold. Television crews were setting up equipment while well-dressed people streamed into the building. This was clearly a much bigger event than I had anticipated. Through the large glass doors, I could see the reception area filled with people holding wine glasses and engaging in animated conversations. Local news anchors were conducting interviews, and photographers moved through the crowd capturing candid moments. A red carpet had been laid out, though it was much more understated than the flashy display at Marcus's hotel. This felt authentic, professional, meaningful. I parked in the designated area and checked my watch, 7:25 p.m. Perfect timing. As I stepped out of my car, a young woman with a clipboard approached me. "Ms. Thompson? I'm Ashley from the production team. We're so excited to have you here tonight. Your segment is absolutely beautiful." The pride in her voice made my chest tight with emotion. 6 blocks away, Marcus was hosting his gala, completely unaware that his embarrassing sister was about to be celebrated on national television. At exactly 7:30 p.m., the media attention intensified. News crews began positioning themselves as word spread that this wasn't just a local documentary screening. This was a major national History Channel premiere with potential national distribution. Local reporters who had initially come for a small story realized they were covering something much bigger. Through the convention center windows, I could see the audience taking their seats. The room was packed with community members, automotive enthusiasts, and media representatives. This was clearly going to reach far beyond our small town. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Rebecca, this is Janet from Channel 7 News. We heard about the documentary and would love to interview you. Can we chat before the screening?" Then another. "Ms. Thompson, this is the regional correspondent for the Tribune. Would you be available for a few questions?" The attention was overwhelming but also validating. People were interested in my story, in my car, in the values we represented. Meanwhile, just blocks away, Marcus was probably wondering why several local media personalities had left his gala early. He had no idea they were rushing to cover a much bigger story, one starring the sister he'd been mocking for years. What happened next exceeded my wildest expectations. As I walked up the red carpet with Ashley, cameras began flashing and reporters called out questions. "Ms. Thompson, how does it feel to have your car featured in a national documentary? What's the secret to keeping a car running for over 20 years? Tell us about the relationship between you and your vehicle." I answered as gracefully as I could, explaining the bond between my car and my family's journey. The crowd of onlookers had grown significantly, with people stopping on their way to other downtown events to see what was happening. Local business owners stepped out of their shops to watch the proceedings. Word was spreading quickly through social media that something special was taking place. Inside the convention center, I could see people taking photos and videos, live streaming the event to friends and family. What had started as a simple documentary screening was becoming a community celebration. The same car that had been mocked at family gatherings was now being celebrated as a symbol of American resilience and values. As I approached the entrance, the crowd erupted in warm applause. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and appreciated for who I really was. The documentary segment was more beautiful than I could have imagined. As the lights dimmed and my story began playing on the large screen, I felt tears prick my eyes. There was my car, filmed with loving detail, looking dignified and proud. The narrator spoke about resilience, about the American spirit of making things last, about the bond between a woman and the vehicle that had carried her through life's challenges. They had interviewed Mr. Jenkins, who spoke glowingly about my character and dedication. They had footage of me maintaining the car, talking about our shared history, explaining what loyalty meant to me. The audience was completely silent, absorbed in the story unfolding before them. When the segment ended with a shot of my car in the golden hour light, the applause was thunderous and sustained. People were wiping their eyes, nodding in recognition of something they understood deeply. As the lights came back up, Michael Rodriguez approached with a huge smile. "Rebecca," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "that was absolutely perfect. You and your car represent everything this documentary series is about, authentic American values that can't be manufactured or bought." The crowd erupted again, and I felt overwhelmed by the genuine warmth and respect surrounding me. The aftermath was incredible. Local news crews surrounded me for interviews, asking thoughtful questions about my journey, my values, and my relationship with my faithful car. People from the audience approached to share their own stories of beloved vehicles and family sacrifices. Social media was exploding with posts about the documentary and my segment specifically. Meanwhile, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages were pouring in from people I hadn't heard from in years, all expressing pride and admiration. But the most telling messages were from Marcus's gala guests. "Rebecca, I had no idea. So proud to know you. Just saw the news coverage. You're famous. Why didn't anyone tell us about this at the gala?" I realized that word had reached Marcus's event. Several of his guests had left early when they heard about the documentary premiere. Others were checking their phones and social media, discovering that the woman they'd been dismissing at family gatherings was being celebrated 6 blocks away on national television. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Marcus was trying to impress people with expensive catering and borrowed status, I was being honored for the authentic values I'd lived by every day. The same car they'd mocked had become a symbol of something precious and increasingly rare in our world. The media attention was overwhelming but wonderful. Reporters asked thoughtful questions about my car's history, my single motherhood journey, and what the documentary meant to me. "Ma'am, what would you say to people who think older cars aren't worth keeping?" one journalist asked. "I'd say that value isn't determined by age or appearance," I replied. "It's determined by reliability, by service, by the memories and trust built over time." Michael Rodriguez stood nearby, nodding approvingly as he filmed B-roll footage for future promotional materials. "This is exactly the message we hope to convey," he told the cameras. Rebecca and her car represent authentic American character. In a world obsessed with the newest and most expensive, they remind us that real worth is built through dedication and maintained through care. The crowd of onlookers continued to grow as people shared videos and photos on social media. What was supposed to be a simple documentary screening had become a viral moment celebrating values that resonated deeply with people. Local business owners were offering to sponsor future events. The mayor appeared to present me with a key to the city. This wasn't just recognition. It was validation of a life lived with integrity and purpose, values my family had somehow forgotten to appreciate. It didn't take long for my family members to start appearing. Aunt Patricia pushed through the crowd, her face beaming with sudden enthusiasm. "Rebecca, honey," she called out as if we'd always been close. "I always knew that car was special." Uncle Tony appeared next, nodding approvingly. "I told everyone at the reunion that car had character," he declared, though I clearly remembered him laughing the loudest. My cousin Rachel materialized with her phone out, trying to get a selfie with me and the documentary poster. "Can you believe my cousin is on the History Channel?" she announced to anyone who would listen. It was amazing how quickly their tune changed. The same relatives who had suggested I trade up were now praising my wisdom in keeping my classic car. The same people who had snickered at family dinners were now claiming they'd always admired my choices. I was polite but distant, remembering every cutting comment, every dismissive laugh. Michael Rodriguez watched the family dynamics with interest, his director's instincts clearly picking up on the undercurrents. "It's interesting how success changes people's perceptions," he murmured to me quietly. I nodded, thinking about how true those words were. These same people would probably be telling everyone tomorrow that they'd always supported me, always believed in my values. Marcus finally arrived, having clearly rushed over from his gala. His tuxedo was disheveled, his bow tie crooked, and his face was flushed with a mixture of shock and frustration. "Rebecca," he said, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside, away from the cameras. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" His voice was strained, confused rather than angry. "You're on national television, and I had no idea." I looked at my brother, this man who had spent years making me feel small, and felt nothing but calm. "You never asked about my life, Marcus," I said quietly. "You were too busy telling me what was wrong with it." "But this is huge," he protested. "This changes everything. People at my gala were leaving to come here. Do you know what that did to my event?" His face showed genuine bewilderment. "You could have warned me, could have let me know you were involved in something this important. Do you know how this makes me look?" And there it was. Even now, faced with undeniable proof of my worth, all he could think about was how it affected his image. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I've been the same person all along. The only thing that changed tonight was that other people finally noticed." Before he could respond, I walked back toward the documentary crew, leaving my brother standing alone in his expensive tuxedo, finally understanding what he had failed to see for years. Michael Rodriguez gathered the crowd as the evening wound down. Before we conclude tonight's premiere, he announced, I want to say something about what we've witnessed here. The audience quieted, sensing something important was coming. Rebecca Thompson and her faithful car represent something we're in danger of losing in America, the understanding that real value isn't flashy or expensive. It's built through dedication, maintained through care, and proven through service. He gestured toward me and my car, which sat gleaming under the lights in the parking area visible through the windows. In our documentary series, we feature stories like Rebecca's because they remind us what matters. Not the newest model or the biggest price tag, but the character, reliability, and dignity that come from a life well lived. The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. Rebecca has shown us that worth isn't determined by what others think of you, but by the values you live by every day. Her car has been a faithful companion for over 2 decades, just as she has been a faithful friend, mother, and community member. He paused, looking directly at Marcus, who stood at the back of the crowd. These are the stories that make America strong. Not wealth or flash, but character and substance. The applause was thunderous and sustained. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks as the crowd erupted around me, finally understanding what I had known all along. As the evening wound down, people began asking about future episodes of the documentary series and when my segment would air nationally. Michael Rodriguez shook my hand one final time. Rebecca, this has exceeded all our expectations. The response tonight, the social media engagement, your story is going to reach millions of people. The production crew began packing their equipment, but the celebration continued in the parking lot around my car. People were taking photos, asking questions about maintenance, sharing their own stories of beloved vehicles. It felt like a community had formed around the values my car represented. I climbed into my driver's seat, feeling the familiar comfort of the worn leather. As I started the engine, the crowd gathered around, applauding as the faithful motor hummed to life. I rolled down the windows and could hear people calling out encouragement and gratitude. Slowly, I pulled out of the parking space and began the drive home. In my rearview mirror, I could see the crowd still gathered, the lights of the convention center glowing, the documentary banner visible in the distance. At a red light, I glanced over to see Marcus standing on the sidewalk outside his hotel, still in his wrinkled tuxedo, watching my car pass with an expression of wonder and regret. For the first time in years, he seemed to truly see me. I nodded once, acknowledging him not as someone I needed to prove myself to, but as someone I hoped might finally understand what real value looked like.